Hello, martial arts journeymen and women. Today in this live stream, we'll be talking about martial arts cults and more specifically, a Kung Fu cult. I'll be joined by Patrick Fulop, who has been on a similar journey like mine. For years, he was a devoted Kung Fu practitioner, eventually became disillusioned and moved on to combat sports. He also has a YouTube channel called Effective Martial Arts, so you might have seen him around. Where he shares some of his experiences and his own method of how he teaches martial arts these days, including a belt system for MMA, which we might touch upon as we go. In one of our conversations with Patrick, he mentioned his experience of being part of a Kung Fu organization, which was very much a cult. And he also gave me hints that there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened, very intriguing stories, but I don't know the exact details myself yet. I always like to share those conversations with all of you. So I am as curious to hear them as I'm sure you are. Also, stay tuned till the end of our conversation, till the end of this live stream, because at the second half of the live stream, we'll be doing a Q&A. So me and Patrick will answer all of your questions. So that's going to be there too. So in the end, just let's do this as always. Grab your preferred beverage and let's get this journey started. And let's welcome Patrick. So,
all right.
Hi, Patrick.
Rokas, thank you so much for having me.
Really
happy to be here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing this crazy story.
Me too. I keep hearing you mentioning that crazy word, and I bet it's crazy. So I'm curious to learn what the craziness is all about.
But I know you've been through your fair share as well, and you've heard a lot from different practitioners all across the world. And that's something I wanted to mention as well, is that I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing, bringing attention to this subject in the martial arts industry specifically by sharing people's stories and similar incidences, because it is an unfortunate reality. There's a lot of schools that function in a cultish way, and there's uneven power imbalances involved and sometimes exploitation, and it can create problems for a lot of people. So I have never shared my story before publicly, only with friends and in small circles. This is the first time I share it, and I think you've been a big part of the inspiration for me to go there on a public platform. Previously, I've always been hesitant to do this. One, because, well, one, fear of reprisals. Cult organizations can be very vicious with ex-members, especially ex-members who speak up against their organizations. But also, like, the fear of basically looking stupid, right? Because I did fall for it. I was naive. Like, it was like, looking at it from the past, I mean, it was so obvious now. And I kind of surprised myself that, like, I actually went through all that. And I really, like, went through it. Like, I wasn't like a casual practitioner. I invested myself, much like you, like 110% in that organization. And yeah, so I was a bit hesitant to share it, but I think it's more important to share the lessons and the story so other people can learn from it and hopefully prevent similar situations or possibly help loved ones that are involved in similar situations as well. I think that's more important than any fear that I might have. So once again, thank you for sharing your story and helping others share their stories. And I think it's important work that we're doing here.
Sure. Well, thank you for your kind words. And I just want to chip into the main idea and to say as well, like, especially people who haven't, in what I noticed is that special people who haven't had that experience, it's very easy for them to judge, and everyone thinks they're not going to become a cult member because it's like, oh, that's never going to happen to me.
Exactly.
But funny enough, the previous live stream I did with a lady who was in part of a karate cult.
I saw it too. Great.
Right. She said, like, she literally said she was sure she'll never get into a cult until it was too late, and she realized, oh shit, this karate school is a cult. So I just want to kind of point out that, you know, the people who judge and they say, oh, you know, these people are stupid, they fell for a cult. They don't know what they're talking about, and they might get to know it sooner or later. And the smart ones, they realize that it's like, yeah, cults are sometimes they get into your brain even if you're a smart person.
Yeah, no, they're insidious, right? And
Right.
nobody willingly joins a cult. We're not like, hey, I think I could use a cult in my life, you know. So
Right.
let's shop around for a cult. Nobody does that. It's always
Mm.
disguised in terms of another organization, and then slowly but surely you get indoctrinated and you start doing things that you never thought you could do, just because of the cult dynamics that are at play. So it's definitely a dark subject, but it's something that's so prevalent, not only in the martial art industry, but like in a bunch of other fields as well. Online now, like it's something that's so prevalent that people need to be educated about that, and sharing our story, I think, is the best way to do that.
100%, and I agree, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm also excited we're doing this, because when people know the stories behind it, they can start to recognize, because it's usually quite universal, and
Yeah,
they're like, hey, actually, this is happening in my school as well. Like, what the
yeah,
heck? Maybe mine is a cult as well, or
yeah,
they go to school and they're like, oh, it's just the same that thing that Patrick spoke about. So I
yeah,
think
yeah.
this is going to be good.
All right, looking forward to it. Really excited about this.
So I have a bunch of questions, but I'm pretty sure the story also has its narrative.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking I'll ask you a specific question, but then feel free to jump back to the beginning and say whatever, the way you tell your story, or
Sure.
you're about to tell your story. But my question is, so when did you first became suspicious that something is off?
Oh, okay. Very good question. So that's towards the end, obviously. So
Mm.
it was I would say it was a kind of a gradual process. It started with a little bit of doubt,
Mm.
right? The seed of doubt is typically what gets you out of a cult eventually.
Mm.
I know you went through a similar process, questioning
Mhm.
Aikido, and eventually that's what got you out of that. So I went through something very similar. In my case, it's because I was so involved in the organization, I was actually running the school,
Mm.
like and like for free, like I wasn't paid, but I was the person running the school full time with one of my training partners and a bunch of other people helping. But like we were responsible for it. So sales, marketing, instructor training, all of that. Like we were really hands on there every day from morning till late night. Plus handling all of our master's personal affairs as well, because that's what you do as a good disciple, right? Um, uh, and because of that, I started researching the martial arts industry. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to educate myself on best practices in the industry. What's the best introductory process? What's the best sales techniques? What's the best, administrative work? Everything that surrounds the actual teaching of a martial arts school. And I was met with a lot of resistance in terms of the ideas that I wanted to bring, right? Because of traditional thinking.
Mm.
And I started, then that was the seed of doubt. That's what started me questioning the value of tradition, the value of the way things were done, tradition versus traditional thinking, and basically just the force of habit. And once that seed was planted, eventually I'll get into how the whole thing unraveled. And eventually that led to a moment where I said, fuck, I'm in a cult. Right? It's like it's a click at some point, and then I just wanted out. And eventually it was a very big turn of events where a lot of people left at the same time.
Mm.
Because we were able to share that information. So we'll get into all that as the story unfolds.
Sure. So feel free to just take it where you feel like what's the best place to start
All
or
right.
continue that story.
Cool. So, well, let's start at the beginning.
Hmm.
Early 2000s, I was 19 years old at the time. I think that's the age that you started your Aikido as well, right? Am I correct?
Well, I'll just quickly say a point. So I started actually even earlier. I
Yeah,
started when I was 14, but when I was
but your
19,
second school.
right, I moved in to live as a full-time student, so that was like the complete full-on thing. But
So,
still, similar
so,
age.
so it's an age where like we're very impressionable,
Hmm.
idealistic,
Mm.
teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
In my case, I was just kind of midway through CJEP. It's kind of like a school between high school and university that we
Mm.
have here in Quebec. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, right? I didn't have
Mm.
any clear career path. Nothing really interested me at the time. I used to be a competitive swimmer. So I was an elite athlete, which is a weird thing because I'm like really short. I don't have the build of a swimmer at all, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the training, and at some point, when you're in amateur sports, either you go to the Olympics or you don't, right? And I was obviously not gonna, so I was looking at other options, And one of my friends, high school friend, very close friend, one of my best friends, was in this local neighborhood kung fu school, and he told me, "Hey, like you come check it out. It's really cool. It's like same thing that Bruce Lee does, and it's really cool for self-defense, and it's like you should try it." So I did, and from the moment that I got there, immediately I was charmed. Like I saw, the decor, the yin yang, and the Chinese writing on the wall, and like the little shrine in front, and like the appearance of the instructors with the uniforms and everything that went on in that organization, the structure of it, and then the mysticism that was taught as well, right? The fact that we were told or led to believe in no uncertain terms that this was a secret method. This was powerful stuff, unbeknownst to the public. Like this is like secret stuff, that like the ancestral knowledge passed down through this particular lineage. And I know that's a common thing in the martial arts, right? The exclusive nature of the teachings of any particular school. And quite frankly, I chose to believe because I think it met a need for me that I had, which really was a need for more confidence, which I think is pretty much when it boils down to it, pretty much the main reason people join martial arts fundamentally, in my opinion, even sometimes when it's not conscious, but like people are striving and looking for that sense of confidence. Oftentimes it's expressed through self-defense skills. Knowing that you can defend yourself physically is obviously a huge confidence booster. But in our case, it went further than that. Like it was really the promise of superhuman skills. Okay. Superhuman powers, like the tales of like old kung fu masters that could like jump over buildings and like light shit on fire with their hands and like like stuff like that. And that's what we were slowly taught about in that school, and that's what I chose to believe. So that was kind of the starting part where I got involved in the organization, and I didn't take the time to question it. I didn't think twice of like, is this really true, or is there other methods out there? I just dove like headfirst in it, like really, really hard. I think you were the same, right, in your Aikido training originally?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a quick story, but I consider myself to be a very good student in regards to just following it. Trust the guru, follow the sensei. I was kind of taught, I wasn't forced to believe it, but I was taught to believe that the more you will obey the teacher, the quicker you will learn. And if you don't obey, you just waste your time. And I wanted to learn as quick as I can. So I had high motivation to just not question, follow the rules, go for it.
Exactly. Same thing here. Like I was the model student, like the true believer, and that's what happens in cult-like organizations when you adhere to some kind of belief. The belief system and the organization like becomes your personality. You kind of fuse into it. It becomes your identity, right? And I really that's what happened to me. I just went all in, literally. And I, like you, like there was this story that was actually told to us. Like this was, and that's one of the kind of indoctrination tactics that happened in that organization, which is universal in a lot of situations where we would do the training, which was like 2 hours long, no water, you train hard, and then so you tire yourself, and then at the end is when you kind of sit in a circle, and then they do kind of a mat chat where they educate you on the values and philosophy of martial arts and all that. And that was the time where they would indoctrinate you. They would talk about the system and talk about the values and talk about the master and talk about the ideal behavior that you should have as a student. And to illustrate it, they actually told this story where it was a story of like three young boys in China at the time, in times immemorial, where with this old Kung Fu master, and the old Kung Fu master would say they were standing at the edge of a cliff. And he would say, jump off the cliff. And then two of the boys wouldn't jump, right? Because obviously you don't want to jump off a cliff when somebody tells you to jump off a cliff. But the third one did. And what happened is the master, in one fell swoop, caught him by the collar, brought him back to safety, and then taught him the ancient secret methods of Kung Fu. And he became a super grandmaster and was able to dominate the world of martial arts henceforth. So that's the type of brainwashing that we were told originally, and for better or for worse, I bought into it, and I really started doing everything that I could to be a good disciple, be a good student, be a good practitioner, and I didn't once question until many years later if it was the right thing to do. I was only thinking about how can I do this more and better.
There's a quick question I'm curious to ask, and you might get to this naturally, but. Do you think they did it intentionally with some ill will, or do you think it was more just that's how they were brought up and it was more a subconscious desire to control? Or so was it conscious, let's deceive these guys and let's make them our followers, or unconscious?
Well, for the people involved, like the higher ups in the ranks, definitely unconscious. They were just repeating the message that was given to them by the master. Grandmaster in this case. In terms of his intentions, I'm still debating it in my mind. I think it has, obviously he didn't have his disciples' best interests at heart. That's for sure, because at a certain point, like you could clearly see like where interests, there was a conflict of interest, and he had no consideration for the well-being or the happiness of people close to him. Why did he get there? Why did he kind of slip in that direction? Hard to say. Maybe it's his upbringing. Maybe it's personality. I mean, I read up a lot on narcissistic personality disorder. Like that's a thing. People fall prey to that. And sometimes cults are started with good intentions, but also I think people here in the West, where the school was established, had a lot to do with it, because we gave them that power. We wanted to believe, we wanted to follow, and we didn't question, right? So funny thing is, like, it was an East Asian origin, and there were very few people of that culture in that school, because you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Like, people were used to that type of boasting in that culture, exaggerating, and type of, I would say, a lot of win-lose mentality. In situations where you have a difficult upbringing and developing countries, it's sometimes, there's just not enough to eat. So you got to do what you got to do to get your own. And the context is different when there's abundance. And I think that's what influenced his mentality. And eventually, I think it just got to him. The power got to his head, and he started slipping. And that's how this whole thing eventually went way too far. And we'll get to how that unraveled at the end. It was very spectacular how that happened. But I think that's it. So environmental factors, personality factors, genetics, and then it is what it is. It happened. It happens a lot.
So what's the next part of the story?
So I would say, like, from the moment that I stepped into the organization, it became kind of a blur. The rest, the few years that followed, my ascension basically through the ranks, I just wanted to do more and better, and spend more time into it, train more, do a better job as a disciple, take better care of the school, invest myself more, take more responsibilities. And nothing was too costly, nothing was too difficult for me to do. I just wanted to reach the top of the organization as quickly as possible. I was essentially promised a career, ultimately. that's what was promoted in terms of the reason why we should do all this is eventually we should have our own school, right? And our own following and be successful in the industry. And eventually, represent the name of the ancient lineage and, be the beacon of hope for the entire world eventually. So that's what I was working towards. And because the mission was so great, no amount of work was too much. I was just doing. And through it all, we did a bunch of crazy stuff. So I think this would be a good time to mention some of the extremes that we went to in the name of that organization. Quick example. At one point, I ate only rice for 21 days. Just straight up rice. It was supposed to be like a cure to increase your energy, right? And it's like straight up quackery. Like it was borderline dangerous. You weren't supposed to drink any water. You were just supposed to eat whatever water was in the rice. I was thirsty as hell. And I was like malnourished. At the end, I looked like a 12-year-old boy. And I did it. I just ate straight up rice for 21 days with nothing else in it. I think there is value to fasting. It is a good thing, but doing so in such an extreme manner, I think it's really not advisable. I once ate a spider.
Because?
I ate a spider. Like we were chilling at a table and having a meal like we often would, hearing our master tell his tales of ancient times and brag about his exploits, essentially. And there was just the spider like walking around the table, and he looks at me, he says, "Eat it." I ate it.
Why did he say eat it? Like, what was that about?
I thought about that later on, and in my mind at the time, I saw it as a test of loyalty and teachability. That's how I saw it. That's why I responded. That was my thing. Like I was the disciple. That was my identity then. But looking at it now, I think it was mainly he just wanted to see if he could get me to do it. He was just basically entertaining himself. Is the way that I see it now. See if he could actually pull it off, right? So yeah, that's an example. It's in line with the whole like jumping off the cliff story. Another thing that's really crazy that we did, and that has to do more on like the actual essence of the martial arts that are taught, and that's an unfortunate reality in cult or cult-like organizations, is that because the authority of the leader is so absolute, there's no questioning of the methods that are employed, even in actual training, hand-to-hand combat training. So, and you touched on this as well in a story previously, that you actually got in a self-defense altercation and then reported the story to your master, and he told you that no, it was your fault, right? Because you weren't a good enough student, you didn't practice enough, and you weren't able to defend yourself. It wasn't the fault of the system. It wasn't the fault of the techniques. In your case, Aikido, it was your fault, and that's a big thing in martial arts cult-like organizations, cults in general as well, blaming the disciple for everything that goes wrong. Well, something similar happened in our organization. It wasn't to me personally, but one of my training partners had an altercation pretty much at knife point. Somebody pulled a knife on him, and it was 2 people. And in that situation, he froze, which is not wrong, because you don't want to engage person with a knife if you can avoid it at all. Running away would be the best solution, but next best thing, comply with their demands and just don't try to fight with a knife. You'll get hurt. But then, as he reported the story, same type of thing. You didn't practice enough. You didn't do your stupid forms enough to be able to defend yourself in that situation. But then it went a step further, where we saw that, okay, well, we need to train for this. Maybe we need to modify our training, but the expertise was so poor from our master the actual knowledge of fighting and hand-to-hand combat, that this was our solution. We decided, because it was a multiple opponent situation, we decided we should train multiple opponents, right? Makes sense so far. But we decided to do that. We decided to buy helmets, headgear, the visor, 4 ounces gloves, and fight 4 versus 1, full contact.
That sounds like some head trauma or injuries.
Sounds like a reasonable idea, right?
Until that point, for sure, yeah.
So, mind you, we had never fought one-on-one full contact. That's not how we did it. We decided, no, 4 versus 1 full contact would be the way to start, right? And like if going full contact anyways was a good idea, which is not. Like as if headgear would protect you against head trauma, which is not the case. Ramsey Dewey made a great video on that and on DKU. I don't know if you saw that one.
I haven't seen that one, but I have a good feeling of what Ramsey would say about DKU.
Exactly. So he does these demonstrations where students are wearing helmets and he just knocks the shit out of them.
Wow, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, really not cool. And when they're basically being passive, they're just like not defending and just getting hit. And that's a demonstration. But anyways, that's beside the point. So we fought 4 versus 1 full contact with headgear and 4-ounce gloves. And the visor also like is sharp, and the gloves don't protect your fingers. So like we would cut our fingers. We had people get knocked out. I got knocked out. I got cut inside the mouth. I had to eat through a straw for like a week. There's one guy who got kicked in the balls really hard and recovered. It took like 6 months to recover from that. We had a broken arm, broken elbow, I believe, like broken rib, I think, as well. It was just disastrous. Like it not conducive at all to producing any skills. But it did went on. And then what happened after that? Like I remember us like standing in a circle and like looking at each other and looking at what we did and our performance and commenting on what happened. And we were like, man, like, why can't we apply our Kung Fu in that situation? Why doesn't it work? And never once did it cross our mind that we should actually learn how to box. Actually learn footwork, head movements, right? No, we just needed to practice the shit that we were doing more because we would not question the premise. And that's the really insidious nature of cult indoctrination, is that you never question the premise. You never question the method. You only question yourself. And that's a sad place to be, because you're really limiting your growth and your knowledge. And that's just like one extreme example, but it's unfortunate. And you see it like, I'm sure you saw a lot of like these challenge matches, like Kung Fu versus MMA or whatever style versus MMA. And the guys, you know, there's this one guy, one of the first ones, this old Kung Fu guy, got knocked out in a few seconds.
Yeah.
The Ki Master. He would like throw people.
Okay, that one. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah,
one.
like, it was like way back.
Yeah.
He actually, coming out of it, his delusion was reinforced from that experience. He didn't wake up to it at all. He would just think that, oh, he kind of excuses off as that he was sick that day or whatever, his energy was off or whatever. Right. But he just got reinforced in his delusion out of that experience. So no amount of proof would help you see the light. So that's an unfortunate reality in that situation, and it's something that took us a lot of time to start waking up to. And yeah, so did you experience something similar in the past with your Aikido training?
I think like mine experience wasn't as toxic, especially because it wasn't as physical in that sense. It was more the mental side of it.
Right.
So I definitely had a lot of experiences where I was given conditions to doubt myself and to never doubt the instructor. But I can relate to your story. I never went into full contact, let's bash the hell out of each other, but that's Aikido nature. Aikido is all about
it's a different training methodology. But you still were led to believe that it would work in a real situation.
100%. As you correctly pointed out, my first instructor blamed me every time I got attacked, and I got attacked a significant amount of times because I was
rough neighborhood.
Right, rough city.
Yeah.
And then my second instructor, yeah, he was kind of that way as well. It's just like I'll explain to you even better how to do things next time, but it wasn't about questioning. And that actually just reminds me of a story I love, which is an opposite story and a great example. I think opposites sometimes teach us. So Tony Blauer, self-defense expert,
Yep.
founder of Fear, the way his story began, his student came, he was teaching martial arts, and his student came to him one day with a black eye, and Tony's like, "So what happened?" And the kid says, "I got beaten out. I got beat up in the school." And Tony Blauer says, "Why didn't you do the martial arts things I taught you?" And his answer was, "I was holding a bunch of books in my hand."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I didn't know what to do." And that's the part where I love Tony Blauer, because he could have stopped and said, "Oh, it's your fault. You should have done this." But he was the right type of mindset, and he questioned not the student but himself. And he said, "Well, you know what?" And I think the crucial point was the student apologized to Tony by saying, "Oh, sorry, I failed you." And he's like, "No, actually, you know what? I failed you because I didn't teach you what to do when you're holding a bunch of books in your hand and you're pushed above a wall." And that's how his journey to realistic self-defense started, because then they started training all these scenarios. And so I won't continue that story, but I think that's the opposite example. And our teachers, they did not question themselves, unfortunately.
Exactly. And I heard you tell that story, and it's a great one because it's so easy. Because as you can see, like it's natural for students to question themselves first, because they want to believe in the method that they're following. It's in their best interest to believe. Like that guy who thought, like, "I failed you, master." That's like our instinct. So it's easy as the part of the instructor or the master to basically leave the blame on the student and excuse himself, because then that he saves him the work, right? It's a lot easier, saves him the mistake, the work. But I think as professionals in any organization, as business people, as professionals, we should always question ourselves, and we should always look at what we're doing and try to improve our methods. I mean, it's just basic common sense. But that's unfortunately not what happens a lot of the time. Thankfully, there are people like Tony and other people that do question their methods. Funny enough, same thing happened to me later on when I did have my own school. Once we had split from that organization, is that one of our students also got attacked on the street, and the fight was taken to the ground. And at the time, the Kung Fu training that I had no answer for that.
Right.
There was no grappling, no wrestling whatsoever. And I felt horrible. Like, it kept me up at night. Like, I'm teaching people supposedly how to defend themselves. That's what I was told. That's what I bought when I enrolled in the program. That's what I thought I was teaching. How come that didn't work? How come there's no answer for this? And that's what got me on the path that I am eventually, learning effective martial arts. Trying to look at the situation objectively and look at all the situations that can happen in hand-to-hand combat and addressing those in a systematic and principle-based manner. But I digress. Go ahead.
Are you okay continuing your own story, or you feel like getting a question? What's your?
If you have a question, we can sprinkle that in there. I've been kind of browsing the comments, but I didn't read in detail.
Yeah, no, we'll get to the comments eventually. Don't worry about it. So I think the fallout is definitely the important piece, as we have kind of the setup, the meat of the story. So what happened? Like you mentioned,
the decline, like how it collapsed eventually. Yes, yes. So that's an interesting one. So to give you a little bit of background, like how far it got in terms of being a disciple. I actually sat down recently in preparation for this and went through what it actually cost as a disciple to be a disciple in that school. And I came to the rough estimate of about $12,000 a year, roughly, about $1,000 a month, right? And we weren't obviously like rich. We were kids, basically. We didn't have a career or anything. But to be a good disciple, that's roughly ballpark what it cost. So there was the tuition, there was exams, which were increasingly more expensive. Random ceremonies that you had to pay for every time. Like anytime, like you certain levels in the organization for which you had to undergo a ceremony become like a, I don't know, the titles that you get as you go through the ranks. We were encouraged to buy like potions. Like there was a potion. There's a potion you were supposed to rub on your skin to make your bones stronger, right? And that was like $120 a bottle. There was potions that were like ginseng based, which ginseng is a good supplement. I do take some sometimes, but we were charged again $200 a bottle for that special concoction. Restaurants, we would go out to eat, and obviously it was the disciples that paid every time we went to eat. The master would not pay for his meal. That was unthinkable, right? Maintenance of his own home and garden, right? We would work in the garden. We built a deck for his pool. We renovated his house. Like we did all kinds of crazy shit like that. And we would pay for the materials. Like we would do the work and pay for the materials, pay for the upkeep. He would spend half the time in his home country. We would maintain his home while he was gone, and eventually also run the school full time. So like I said earlier, teaching, sales, marketing, website development, social media, like everything, the whole 9 yards.
You mentioned there was no pay in that, right? So how was that?
No. So yeah, there was no pay. So obviously there's the opportunity cost also added to that actual cost. We were paying to work there.
Oh yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
That's what was happening. So there's the opportunity cost of having other stuff that we could have done, which is just basic job. You could have 30,000 a year doing whatever, and yeah. So that's how it went. Furthermore, then so yeah. Because of that, the reason that I did that was because, one, we were told that that's the way it is. In a traditional school, the master has absolute authority, and the students do all the work. We mop the floors after class, and keep the school clean, and everything else in between. So we were taught that that's pretty much the definition of the traditional school, and anything other than that was incorrect. It wasn't the way to do it in the martial arts. And if people would do that, it was wrong. But then we were told that if we did that enough, eventually we would get paid.
Right.
There was always that carrot at the end of the stick, right? We would say, okay, well, guys, and then we wanted to do good. We wanted to grow the school, grow the name, the reputation. And it was said that, like, okay, well, you guys are at like 100 and so students in the school. And when I really got into it, eventually we took it all the way to 250 because of my involvement and one other guy and a bunch of other people to help. But like we were kind of leading the whole show. And every time, like we said, okay, well, get it to 150, then I'll pay you something. Oh yeah, well, get it to 200, and maybe I'll give you such and such rank. Okay, well, get it to 250. It was always like that. So eventually I was like, I was starting to approach my 30s. I wanted a family eventually. I wanted, make a living. Fuck. that's what I wanted.
Sure.
So eventually I decided to, the other opportunity that was present in that situation was opening a franchise. Because there were franchises opening at that time. And I decided to do that. So I actually asked for permission. I went early in the morning to his house as we go for walks and asked for permission. Listen, I want to do this. I really want to invest myself and grow the school's reputation. How about I take this place a little bit further away and open a school, a branch of the organization? And it was okay. So I was awarded the permission to do so. At that time, I already had some doubts because of the whole I was essentially deceived and disappointed mostly that it wasn't paying off everything that I was doing, and not only in terms of tangible rewards, but even in terms of credit awarded. Like we were never praised for the work that we did. The credit was never given to the hard work, and it was all because of the reputation of the master and his teaching, and he took all the credit, and we were left with all the blame. Right, and it was a hard situation to live with, because everybody wants to do good, and it's a fundamental need. You need to be appreciated for your work, right?
Sure.
Especially when you're working under someone. I'm sure like you've had experiences where you were working under a master as well, or
Oh yeah. again, I want to point out my experience wasn't as bad to a degree, but it was almost the same but more subtle.
Mm.
But in that regard, I was doing the cleaning
Mhm.
of the show for sure, like we all were, the living
Yeah,
students,
yeah.
the cooking. Thankfully, we weren't like paying for for the sensei's lunch, or we
Okay.
weren't cooking for him every day.
Mm.
But back then, it seemed completely normal to, for example, clean the dojo
Yeah.
or lead a class for free.
Yeah.
Uh, and leading a class, I can still kind of get it. You can still kind of put it as I'm
Yeah.
tutoring, I'm teaching you, especially if it's some
Like
once.
an internship.
Right,
Yeah. But
but
maybe
then
like what, for 3 months? How about
yeah,
10 years? You know?
right. But then with the cleaning in particular, that's like it's crazy, And I guess also you could kind of frame we weren't paying a huge amount of money,
Mm.
so you could kind of
For the
frame, I guess.
tuition, yeah. So it wasn't high quality tuition. So
Right,
yeah.
right. But at the same time, that I think the fair thing would be to point that out and to say, look, if you pay 800, let's say, or 1,000, you don't need to clean, you don't need to cook, you don't need to do these things. But if you want, if you don't have enough money, then we can make this a deal. But no, that was unquestionable. You
Mm.
were supposed to clean the toilet, clean the whole dojo twice per week, do
Yeah.
all these things because martial arts. And now when I look back, it's like, especially when I opened my own school, I did create a living program,
Right.
and questioning everything.
Yeah.
That's that mentality I started to develop, and I started to question because I was taking over the same traditions that my teacher led, and I was
Mhm.
thinking, why am I asking or expecting my living students who are paying me money to for them to clean the environment, to clean the dojo?
Yeah.
And it's not fair. That's stupid. I
I
should
know.
hire someone who does that job or do
Yeah.
it myself. That's like what makes sense.
That's
But
what
in that
people do.
Right, but in that world, it's like, no, it all
Yeah.
makes in that sense in their sense. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's my point.
No, but exactly. I felt exactly the same way. And like when I eventually, that was where I was getting to in my story, is I opened my own branch of the organization and starting having students of my own. And I really didn't, I felt super uncomfortable asking them to do whatever for free. Like, I just wanted to teach them. I wanted them to pay me. I wanted to make a good living. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted to stay, refer other people. I wanted to run a professional organization, right?
Mm.
Just that's the way business works. And it was influenced a lot by, at that time, the work that I was doing, researching different consultants in the industry and best practices to educate myself and do a better job. So what ended up happening is that the school grew fast. I was able to attract a lot of students. And originally, we had this little website, paid for a few Google ads, and we were actually renting a classroom in a C-Jet. Like we would actually move the desks and the chairs and do the class there. Like for $40 an hour, we would rent the room. But soon enough, like the room was full and there was a lot of people coming in. So that was really the beginning of the end for me. I already had that resentment from the methods that I tried to implement. But now, as it was customary to do so, once the school kind of got off the ground a little bit and we had a handful of students, or actually a class full of students at the time, it was customary to invite the master for a visit, right? You probably had something similar in Aikido where
Yeah,
you...
oh, my smile. I'll chip in here quickly.
Yeah.
It was a crazy thing. That's one of the dark things when I consider it back. Because I was in my country,
Mm-hmm.
which is a distance away, and the flights were not cheap, and the organizing wasn't cheap.
You
But
pay for the flight, right?
right, I was expected to invite him once per year, pay for the
Mm-hmm.
flight, pay for, and he was earning way more than I did. Like he didn't necessarily need that money, but there was and also to my country, Lithuania, especially back then, it was a lesser economy country than
Mm-hmm.
the other countries, especially Switzerland, which I was, living in the school. But my the one I had to reach was the same exact like when he would go to Germany or Amsterdam, Holland, whatever. And I had to really push for it, and I was able to make it happen. But usually I would be either on a zero, like I would get nothing, or sometimes I would pay out of my own pocket eventually.
Did you
Just
charge students for that, or...
yeah, I charge students, but
Okay,
eventually
but it didn't come out to enough.
right. So like the first year it was like everyone was excited, but then they got used to it, and by third year I'm like, okay, I didn't have enough. I would basically have to pay him money out of my own pocket, which it wasn't necessarily easy to do. I already had my hands full, But then one year I told him, and I thought it's going to be okay. And I'm like, sorry, but I won't be able to invite you next year because it's a bit too much. And he got really, he wasn't happy.
You got scolded, right?
That was not like a decision I could make. And that was one of the moments which made me question as well, like, wait, something is off. Why did I have to invite him?
Exactly.
And what decent human being, especially he was telling me we're supposed to be at equal level right now. Never happened. But
No,
that
no,
was
no. You can never outshine the master for sure.
right. And if we're friends and if we're on the same officially level, why don't you take a look at like, hey, look, I understand I'm actually pushing this for you to happen, so I might as well make it easy for you. Let's split, 50-50. None of this.
Oh, if I would have said that, man, oh my God. Just smacked in the back of the head. So yeah, essentially, I was lucky enough that he actually was local at that time, so I didn't have to fly him over. But still, a monetary cash gift was expected. In that case, it was $500 for the visit, plus the meal afterwards that was paid for by us, of course. But then, like, he didn't offer any value either. And it was probably the case for you as well. He just basically sat there, right? Did he actually teach anything or do anything?
No, again, I think mine was a toned down version of your experience.
Okay.
My instructor, I always try to not talk too much about him because I'm biased, but
Yeah.
it's fair to say, so he was giving value. But I think it was actually coming from a place of him wanting to he wanted to be in the center of attention. He wanted to be the savior. So he was actually giving more than people would ask for sometimes.
Okay, well that's at least he's offering something instead in exchange, right? Which makes sense.
So that was there, but again, there was no choice either.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not an optional thing, right? So we'll try to wrap this up because we've already been doing 45 minutes.
Good.
But I'll get to how it all unraveled. So that was the beginning of the end, because in that visit that we invited him, I remember very vividly, in that supper that we first during the demonstration, we just basically practiced. He said a few words. There's no value given. It could have been done or not. It didn't change anything. But when we went to eat with like our closest students after, he actually openly insulted me in front of our students. And I remember the words. He said, "You move like a monkey." And referring to the demonstration, they were not in a good sense, like monkey style kung fu. There was no monkey in our particular style, but it was like an open attack, an insult. And I was, I've been scolded before in that organization and publicly chastised for behavior that wasn't correct, and we were taught to be happy about it. That's another component of cults, is like emotional control. Like you're told how to feel. Yeah. And specifically when you get criticized, you're told that you should be thankful for the criticism, constructive or not, because it's your master giving you attention, it's your master wanting you to be better, and it's for your own good, right? Yeah. So I remember it got to me, I was like, ugh. But then my programming kicked in, and I was like, oh, okay, thank you for the feedback. What can I do better? That's how I reacted to it. But there was no follow-up. There was no constructive criticism to follow up. It was just a straight up insult. And I think maybe looking at it now, maybe he felt threatened by the speed at which we were growing the school. Maybe he felt that he was losing influence on me because I was starting to follow more kind of modern business practices in my organization. So he wanted to kind of keep me down. That was his intention.
Sure, you were threatening his superiority, I presume.
Pretty much, yeah. And he was losing control. I think he felt he was losing control on me. So that was, I think, the motivation behind that gesture. And then he took it a bit further, where we were, summoned to a meeting, right? We were often summoned to meetings as the kind of governing, there was a bunch of us, like all the higher ups. We were kind of a council. And oftentimes we were summoned to meetings. Anytime he would, within a few hours, okay, come to the school now. We have an important, urgent meeting, had something to tell us. We would all, sure enough, show up. And in that case, it was a meeting to publicly criticize me in front of my peers for my recent behavior, which in this case specifically was that I was now investing too much time in my own business, and I wasn't putting as much effort in his business. Something that I had been doing, mind you, for 10 years in the past.
Mm.
And I had the talk, I had asked for permission, listen, I want to do my own thing. And it was a win-win situation because that branch or that franchise would be paying 10% also on the gross.
Mm.
Plus 100% of exam fees, plus visits, regular visits, plus a whole bunch of other stuff that would go directly. So it was a win-win situation. But still, I was publicly criticized for not investing as much time in the mother organization and not investing as much time in taking care of his personal affairs.
Right.
Like we would have shifts to basically chauffeur him around whatever he wanted to do. Like it was that. It was fucked up. Okay, so we were on call. We took shifts to be on call to just tend to whatever he wanted to do. Wanted to do groceries, whatever, go to DMV. Like we would do that shit for him, right? And I started not wanting to do that anymore because I had a business to run. I had people to answer. I had customers calling. I had emails to send. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to grow my school. But I got publicly chastised for doing so. And I was accused of being too ambitious. Ambitious. Wanting to succeed. Isn't that a good thing? Aren't you supposed to want to grow your school when you have a school? Right?
It seems to me, from hearing that part of the story, is that my guess would be that he felt so threatened and he didn't have the right tools to respond. Like he just used extreme manipulation, or he used kind of an extreme version of the methods he was using before. But it's just like a poor way of responding because he just didn't know how to deal with it. So it doesn't sound like there's anything reasonable behind that.
No, it was probably just an emotional reaction. But essentially, that's the moment I decided to leave.
Sure. Right.
That's the moment I said, look, clearly this guy does not have my best interest in mind.
Right.
That's the moment I realized that. I had some doubts before, but like that was the switch.
Right.
That was a hard realization.
Right.
Like somebody you've placed so much trust in for a decade and realizing that, it's all bullshit? It really, like, there's no carrot. The promise isn't there. And we're basically always going to be slaves, essentially. We're never going to be able to succeed. We're never going to be able to even just make a living doing what we were supposed to love. And we did love. We did love training. I got disillusioned with the whole Kung Fu thing later on, but first was like the organization itself. So that's how it went. And then what happened after that was really crazy. At the time, we had a few people like me that had their own branch. I think 5 or so in and around the area, And things were getting pretty heavy. Like there was talks about franchise contracts. There were talks about like charging us a franchise fee after the fact that we actually had opened our schools. And in that franchise agreement, also there was no value exchange. Like if you pay for a franchise, usually there's, marketing, supports, materials, whatever that. So it's supposed to be a win-win situation, which obviously was not. And one fateful day, a couple months later, that was the real event that sparked what we call, and for people watching who are part of the organization, you'll know what I'm referring to. Leave a comment if you were there. I want to read those comments after. The email wars. So that's how it all exploded and crumbled at the end. We received an email following a New Year celebration, Chinese New Year. So a few times a year, it was a special occasion where we were expected to give a gift. Right? So there was the master's birthday, there was the school's founder's birthday, and there was Chinese New Year. So 3 times a year, a little bit for Christmas, Father's Day, whatever, but we had to give regular gifts, basically, right? And we received an email from him, an angry email. He was angry because we had only collected $2,500 as a gift. Like pissed off. Like, you guys don't appreciate me, you ingrates. This is all that you show in terms of your love and appreciation after all I have given you. Like that type of email. For $2,500, a gift of $2,500. And he proceeded, go ahead.
I would take that money.
yeah. Somebody give you $2,500 as a gift? Like, yeah, okay, sure. I wouldn't be pissed about it. But that's how far it went. I think he got so far in his delusion and the power that he had over us. And every time he asked for something more, we would give it. And again, it was on us. Like we went there. We didn't like dig our heels earlier, and we just went with it because we thought that was what we were supposed to do as good disciples. So it went that far. But at that time, we had enough. Like we were overtaxed, overworked, we were tired. Everybody was in the same situation as me. And when we got that email, and then he proceeded, he even did another email after. I actually saved it in a Word document and then to have the whole conversation. I reread it to prepare for this. It's crazy stuff. He proceeded to establish fixed amounts. Okay, school owners, you need to give $400. Higher ups, higher ranks, you need to give $200. Then this lower rank, you need to give $100. Like, it was a tax. It wasn't a gift at all. Like, he established fixed amounts to ensure his own financial abundance, right? So it took us a month to respond. But at that time, like, everybody was pissed, but you wouldn't talk about it. Because how would you bring it up, right? I don't know if you've experienced that. Like, if you have doubts, you don't talk about it.
Yeah, in a way, yes. I think even the whole structure, the way we were conditioned, was that doubting and questioning was just not a good thing. And for sure, a lot of doubts would stay in our minds, would never be spoken. Yeah.
Exactly. You had to censor your own opinions. Because
Right.
if you had doubts versus it would get right back to the leader. Anybody hearing you complain about the way you're treated or the way things were done would immediately report it back as a good disciple, and then you would get excluded, possibly even expelled, for just having those thoughts.
Right.
Because then you're not. My battery is 20%. Let's try to finish this. So yeah, you wouldn't share those opinions, but now at that point it had gone so far that we were all feeling the same way. So we kind of approached it like on eggshells and, hey, how do you feel about that email, man? Like we were trying to tread carefully. But eventually it got to the point where like we saw that everybody was pissed equally. And we had like a secret meeting about it that we didn't tell the other people. And then we got into a whole, we actually confronted him via email, which was cool because then it's like crystallized, like it's black on white, and you have the proof that we can then share with other people, which we did. But then we went back and forth via email. One of my training partners actually raised the question, listen, like confronted him, say like, this is not okay. You can't just charge us fixed amount for a gift. Like, what are we to you? Like, are we just like cash cows? Why? What is this? Like, and this guy in particular wasn't even training anymore. He was just kind of part of the group socially. And sure enough, he was met with a absolutely vehement criticism and then struck on the head via email. And that's when I jumped in. And at that time, I had already been doing all kinds of research on the cult phenomenon because I wanted to really understand. Even if like my family had told me that like I was in a cult, friends had told me I was in a cult, I did not believe it at the time because I didn't want to believe it. But once this all unraveled, I was forced to look at it, and I started educating myself and seeing how cults are formed and what cult leaders are like. And I just put it black on white in an email. I said, listen, this is how cults function. And I wrote it in such a way that all his actions were described in that email. And I even said that, like, this is how you're going to react. You're going to try to emotionally manipulate me. You're going to try to criticize me. You're going to try to exclude me. You're going to try to make me feel bad. You're going to try to gaslight me. This is what you're going to do. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be a cult leader, or can we actually talk about this and maybe save the organization? As you can think, it's all unraveled from there. People fought from both sides. But eventually, I'd say 3/4 of the leadership left. and a good proportion of the students, because we actually just basically shared that conversation. In that Word document, we sent it to everybody involved, and they could see black on white, like this is not okay. What actually finished the whole interaction was that original email, when he requested those fixed amount for the gifts, he also built us up against another school that he had in a different city, saying that they had contributed twice the amount, and they were actually less students over there. So he made us feel bad of having not contributed enough, despite our greater numbers. And he actually told us to verify with them the amount that he said. He said $5,000. He's so deluded was he that he told us to check, and we did. It was actually 2,000. So he had lied about the amount that somebody else gave him to make us feel bad, so he would get more in his gift. And we had it black on white, and that's the last that's the last time I addressed him personally, just to confront him with that lie. And I finished with a quote by Abraham Lincoln, if I remember correctly. It goes, "You could lie to one person all the time. You can lie to everyone some of the time, but you can't lie to everyone all the time." That was the last line of text that I sent him. And that's it. That's how we left. And the rest is a different story, how we recovered from that and rebuilding an identity and going through. So I don't know if we have time to get into all that, but that was how I left the martial arts cult, at least.
I will want to open up us for questions soon enough, but I have two questions before we do that. So, a subject you brought up yourself more or less before. Some people would blame, they would say, it's your fault, you fell for it. It's a common thing to do for people who never went through this type of experience.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people?
So people who are in similar situations and blame themselves?
No. So some people would, and even in the comments I see that, they're like, how could you ever get into this? Like they would blame you for getting into that place, not recognizing that it's a cult. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. Like, I was stupid. Like, I do take responsibility for what happened. I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't even shop around for a martial arts school when I got involved. I just went to the first one following the recommendation by my friend. And I chose to believe. So my bad, fool me once. But thankfully, I learned from the experience. And I can't say that it was all bad either, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I weren't for that experience. My life could have gone very differently, but I'm happy with where I am now. And it gave me a whole opportunity to explore a different area in the martial arts industry. But yeah, it was my fault. But definitely the leader in that case, or the guru, exploited that naivete and that vulnerability. And that was his fault. But it was just a meeting of those two situations, and it happens. You don't willingly join an organization and start doing all that. You get into it, you're charmed by the promise, and then you're asked to give and to give and to give a little bit more until eventually it becomes too much. And that's the downfall of cults, is that like they take it too far. That's why people leave and they eventually rebel against it. In a healthy organization, you find that win-win middle ground where both people are happy to be together. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, or.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean, and I appreciate your answer. At the same time, I wouldn't necessarily agree with you in regards to, because you almost sound like you did take on the blame by saying it was your fault. I personally don't think so, and because I get blamed, all the time. It's like, it's your fault. It's not Aikido's fault. It's all your own fault that you became part of a cult. And it's like, I think that's a stupid thing to say, and people who never had that experience, it's easy for them to say. And I sometimes like to use extreme examples to kind of present a point, and I'll just wing this one. Hopefully it will make sense. But I think, there's even like a blaming culture in rape.
Right.
And it's like, if a woman gets raped, obviously it's a sensitive subject, but it's like, oh, it's her fault because she was wearing that short skirt and she was walking in the wrong place. But it's like, it's such a stupid thing to do. And And like, if that person who says that would get raped, I wonder if he would say the same. But the thing is, the person does take on the blame. They do believe that narrative, but to begin with, no one should get raped, men or women. It's a thing that should not happen. And if that happens to someone, the person to blame is the person who did
The raping.
the raping. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's no blame in that person. You can say, okay, well, that person was at the wrong place at the wrong time, but that's not something to blame, because nobody's prepared for that, and nobody even takes that into mind. I mean, nobody's going out there to be raped. And I think it's an extreme example, but I think with martial arts, it's a little bit similar. With martial arts schools, we don't even expect, like my previous, the person that I had the conversation with, Marie, there was no expectation to begin with that it's possible that a martial arts school may be a cult, and you're conditioned to believe that all of these things are normal gradually, or through movies, through these stories of serving an incredible sensei. There's so many stupid narratives we're actually pumped with, that by the time you become a senior member, you already start, that becomes your world, that becomes your reality. And we don't, because we don't have the information of what is specifically a cult, we never realize that. But again, the evil, like in that extreme rape example, the evil doer is the person who actually did the manipulation. And smart people do get into cults. I love the example of Stephen Hassan. Hassan.
The Moonies.
Yeah, right. And he was an educated student, intelligent, from a smart family.
Yeah, same.
Like, if he got into that, it's like, what to tell about us regular people who are not as educated? It's like anyone can fall for that, and I think we shouldn't blame ourselves.
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
I agree 100%. I mean, like the blame was definitely on him for running a fucking cult. I mean, it was wrong. What he did was definitely categorically wrong. I'm not excusing his behavior. It's just, as a habit in my life, I like to be unreasonable in terms of taking responsibility for my circumstance. I think that's just like something that I do because it gives you the power to now change them.
Right.
I don't like the victim mentality. That's what I'm saying. I like to take responsibility for the situation. That gives me, even if if the power goes out and you can't continue your work, well, maybe you should have bought a generator. It's just like seeing it that way. I find is helpful on a personal level. But I'm not excusing his behavior at all. I just like to take responsibility myself for what I can.
Right. I appreciate that perspective. It's something I tend to do as well, so I relate. Yeah. And before we
be proactive. Did you read the 7 Habits, by the way?
The who?
The 7 Habits, the book.
Oh, no, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read the book.
So habit 1, be proactive. Essentially take responsibility.
Okay, nice. I know how does he say that? The Navy SEAL guy?
Who's it?
Ownership.
Coggins? Is that it?
No, there's another one.
Another one.
Extreme Ownership is a book. It's
exactly. Same thing, yeah. Well. I'm at 10% battery. If I just unplug my earphone and plug the current, will I still be able to talk?
Well, actually, so if you could answer this one more question,
sure.
And then I'll open up to questions, and then we will have that short break to unplug. So that question is, how does it feel for you to talk about it all now?
It feels great, honestly. Thanks for the question. I mean, like I said, I was very hesitant to share that story before, mainly because it ultimately reflects bad on me and having been so naive. But I think it feels great to put it out there. And also, it's been long enough. I mean, it's been 8 years now that I actually left that organization. So I'm able to look at it from a different perspective now.
Right.
Originally, there was a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. The disillusionment was a rough pill to swallow. It's basically like waking up from the Matrix, like you're puking all over the place and you just don't know what is what.
Right.
So it was a rough time at the time, and that's partly why I didn't share it before, because I have unresolved feelings for regarding that situation. Plus, a lot of people that I know, like, basically got stuck in that dynamic, like of like the enemy relationship with the former master. and just being like that became their identity. And that can happen too, right? So after you leave, and then it consumes your whole world of now wanting to fight the phenomenon and wanting to, and I didn't do that up until now. I focused on my own thing. I really needed to rebuild my identity first as a martial artist, as a professional, as a person, just kind of find myself and find my footing, which I did since. So that's why now I can talk about it with in hindsight and with no emotion, well, a little bit of anger still, but I mean calmly and rationally.
Got it. Well, I'll open up for questions, and feel free to take care of what you need to take care of, Patrick, in the meantime.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll just try to unplug. Can you still hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
volume is on.
I'll mute you for a moment. So everyone who are interested to ask any questions, I saw there's a bunch of questions before, so I might track back, but this is the moment. Either for, feel free to ask Patrick, ask me. We'll both answer the best way we can. As always, I encourage you to focus on the subject of today, cults, the story of Patrick's experience, and that whole realm. I know everyone is excited to always ask me questions about Aikido stuff, but today is not the day unless there's no more other questions. So Patrick, are you still with us?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I was able to check a text that my sister sent me just now. So you can still hear me well, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So my sister asked me, what could they have done differently, my family? Because they did multiple interventions with me at the time,
right,
in terms of trying to make me realize that, dude, you're in a cult. Like, wake up. What's wrong with you? And my parents, my family, my friends, we had those discussions. And every time that happened, I was digging my heels. I was just reinforced in my belief, and I would just get into arguments and you don't get it. You're part of mainstream society. We have the truth. Like, this is the method. You do not get it. So nothing came of those discussions. I don't know if you had a similar experience or you've seen people.
Again, as always, I make that point. I think my situation wasn't as extreme, but there were things which were off, and but at the same time, I'm grateful to my parents that they never. I don't think it was, again, as extreme or as toxic, so there was no need for a pure on intervention. But at the same time, I appreciate that my parents didn't do it. They had their doubts, especially at later stages, but they trusted me and believed that I will be smart enough to do it. To realize that. So I kind of appreciate that they did that, because that gave me that space to look through the whole thing. But my partner at that time, she would just sometimes question, and she would be like, "This seems off." And is that okay? Is that a normal thing? So there was no intervention, but that questioning, I would sometimes stop and think, yeah, that's kind of weird. And I'm happy I had a person next to me who had a good bullshit detector and wasn't forcing me to change my mindset, but gave some right questions. So I think that's what helped me.
That's exactly my point. So I had a similar situation. I have to give credit to my wife, which I, interestingly enough, met in that organization. She from the get-go, she knew it was a cult. Like, she knew it was bullshit. But she tried to confront me about it, and she saw that I dug in my heels immediately, and she backed off. And then she changed her approach in terms of she did her best to really see things the way that I did, and she actually infiltrated the whole cult and like got into it with me, and it was kind of a game to her to see like how it goes on. And she did much of the same thing, where she would simply encourage doubt. And I think that's the only method that you can successfully get somebody out of a cult, is by really get interested in what they're doing. Ask them a whole bunch of questions, like non-judgmentally. Get them to talk about it as much as possible. Get them to open up and share how awesome it is, but don't offer judgment. Don't criticize. Don't get into an argument. Don't share your opinion just yet. Just take it in, see things the way they do, and then just offer a little bit questions, like you said. encourage questioning, encourage doubt, because people don't change their beliefs when they're that hardly ingrained. It just doesn't happen. It's not. We don't have the mental capacity. Once we've decided to believe something, confirmation bias. You've talked about this, I think, on Critical Thinkers and maybe on this one as well. Like, you just don't see the information that's contrary to your belief because you choose to believe that.
Right.
So the only way to get out of it is, like I said, seek first to understand. Again, from the 7 habits, habit 5, seek first to understand. And once the person feels that you really get them, then they're going to be open to whatever you have to say. And what you have to say has to come in the form of questions. And then they have to go through the whole process of questioning this. And the seed of doubt has to be given the time to grow. That's the only way out. You have to plant the doubt over and over again. You have to nurture it and fertilize it and water it and give it the space to grow. And when the doubt grows sufficiently enough, soon enough, there's that click. And that's when you wake up. And that's when you want to scream on the mountaintops and you want to shake everybody else and you want to just get back at what happened to you. So that's the way it is. Make sense?
Yeah. I think it's a good answer. So we have a question. I backtracked a little bit, and so Bobby Tavel, I presume, said it's a tough question, but I think it's on a lot of people's minds, and so it's great. It's going to be great if you'll comment. I'll read it out loud.
Yeah.
So what drew you to such a bad teacher to begin with? Not asking to blame, but did he not come off as that way at first? So how was it?
I would have to say it's the mysticism. So he obviously never demonstrated anything. His abilities were beyond question. We were led to believe that he was essentially invincible, all powerful. But we never would have dared to ask him to demonstrate or to back it up or to prove it. It was all hearsay. It was legend. And like I said, I think it was something deep within me at the time. It was the desire to believe, and I think the desire also for a magic pill, essentially, a methodology that would promise superhuman powers. And interestingly enough, like I talked about this in my Why I Quit Kung Fu video, because I did eventually, once I quit the cult, eventually I quit the art entirely and went on to do my own thing. I still believe that martial arts is the closest thing that you can get to a superpower. If you practice it correctly with proper methodology, good techniques, good teacher, good training partners, practice safely and intelligently, is the closest thing we can get. Because if you develop the true ability to, distance management, powerful striking, defense, offense, combined, wrestling, grappling, if you have the ability to take somebody to ground against their will, immobilize them, choke them out, it's really the closest thing you can develop to a superpower. But that takes hard work. I mean, you got to do your fitness, you got to do your conditioning, you got to.
I'm wondering now, Patrick, did I lose you?
For a sec, I just cut off. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good. So can you just feel free to finish the thought?
So just to wrap it up, yeah, exactly. So it was the desire to believe and also the lack of due diligence. I found this method, the same way people buy into health fads and diets, diet pills. Like you essentially find something that's promising and you want it to work and you just go into it. And once you decide that it's the method, it's easy not to question your assumption and your decision, and you just go deeper down that rabbit hole until you're forced to see it for what it is. I hope that answers the question.
I think so, yeah. So a couple more. There's a chaps says, Patrick, how's your emotional and mental health changed since then?
Emotional and mental health changed. I think I didn't get it as bad as perhaps other people. Some people before me, because that was something as well in that particular organization, a lot of people left, like generations before. People were always leaving, especially once they reached the higher ranks. And then they were always demonized and criticized, and like we were brainwashed to hate them, like straight up hate. saying that they were essentially the devil for leaving simply, and for questioning, and for now starting their own thing. We were encouraged to even like stalk them and harass them. It was really dark stuff. And those people, more often than not, left on their own. I mean, they were alone in leaving. I think it was the case of the lady you had on, Marie, earlier. She left and she was alone. A lot of people went through that experience in isolation. And I think that must have been really hard, because when you're in a cult and your whole social circle is those people. It's your family, it's your friends. You have very few relationships outside of it. Oftentimes the relationships with your family are strained as well. So when you leave, a lot of people are left alone, and that must be really hard in terms of your self-esteem and believing in yourself, and just trying to find your way from that point on. I was, I would say, lucky enough, or I don't know, I navigated the situation well enough that I was able to get a whole bunch of people out with me. So we still had that community when it collapsed. We still kind of, and we still talk to this day. We're still in good terms. So I didn't suffer that much from it. I was proud of what I did. When it all collapsed. I was proud of having seen it and shared the truth and enlightened other people to get out of it as well. So I got a pretty good situation from it, and then from then on, I've just been focused on moving forward. I didn't look back. This is the first time actually in 8 years that I really kind of explored and shared the detail of the story. I've just been looking ahead. I've been doing my own thing. I've been learning voraciously on all the other martial arts, and really being amazed of everything that's out there, the knowledge that can be shared now thanks to the internet, and everything, all the developments that happened in the martial arts field since the UFC specifically. I've just been delving into that and just having a blast doing it so far and sharing it with our students.
So I know the person behind this comment, so it's Linda Heffernan, who's saying, Patrick, first, a powerful interview. Thank you. Second, how would you describe your mindset now as you look towards your martial arts future?
Well, yeah, I think funny enough, that was kind of where I just left off on the previous question. But my mindset as I look towards my martial arts future, I think that was something as well that I wanted to touch on, is seeing things not as good or bad, but rather just as events and experiences, and trying to see the positive and how it's conducive to moving forward. So in this case, the positive that came out of the whole experience is I really got to see the dark side of traditional thinking. Cult mentality for sure, but even beyond that is when we're talking about martial arts specifically, and the technical, the techniques and the methodology for training people and training ourselves, the dangers of traditional thinking. That's something that can creep in any industry or company, the tendency to want to, especially as it grows or gets kind of rigid with time, the tendency to want to do things the same way over and over again, just because that's the way things are done, right? You certainly experienced that in your Aikido school. Like, I think you touched on it in the video before. Like, it wasn't important. Oh, it's when in your interview that you did on our channel. It wasn't important effectiveness. It was to do it the way that it was taught.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right. And I had such a bad experience with that, and I saw that it obviously didn't work, that it made me really focus on the value of innovation. And never being satisfied of the way things are done, never being satisfied of the methodology, never being satisfied of the certain way we do a technique, and always looking to improve it. That's the way I look at my martial arts future, at our school's future, at my students' future. Like, I always welcome improvements in the way that we do things, the way that we practice, the way the techniques that we do. And funny enough as well, with this whole pandemic, the way that we teach our students. Right, we've transitioned 100% to virtual learning right now because we're in lockdown. We're not allowed to have in-person classes, and organizations that are traditional in nature just didn't have it in them to do that switch. So I think that's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic. Probably there's going to be the martial arts industry and many other industries are going to get weeded out of people that cannot adapt to the change. But that's how I see it. I see the good thing is I really got to see the importance of innovation, and that's what I'm striving towards in my professional development and for our students. That's actually our mission statement, is to help students of all levels improve faster through innovation. So that's a good thing.
Cool. So I think this question is also on probably a number of people's mind.
Yeah.
So, well, what Kung Fu style were you being taught? So, but I think the second part is more important. Was any of that helpful for you to start over, or did you have to start from zero?
Okay, so it was a particular branch of Wing Chun Kung Fu, one of the least well-known branches. And has any of it been helpful? I'm gonna say no, but there's a little bit. So I could have definitely developed the skills that I have now without any of that Kung Fu training. I don't think I barely kept anything. Funny enough, there was one thing that I kind of use. It's in grappling, especially when you're passing the guard of a supine opponent. There's grip fighting, right? You've done grappling jiu-jitsu, so you fight. You try to get a grip on the ankles and maneuver your way around. I kind of use the sticky hands drill of Wing Chun in that situation particularly. A little bit in clinch fighting as well. The suppleness of the joints and the sensitivity to maneuver yourself in grip fighting, I use it a bit. But that being said, I would have developed that anyways by just practicing grappling, right? And the way that we practiced it in that school, it made no sense. Like we just move our hands around with the person in front of you just to no end. Like in a real situation, you get clinched up, you get taken down, you get punched in the face. Like there's a lot of other stuff that can happen. And that little moment where you're doing the grip fighting is just a small piece of the puzzle. One other thing is I like to punch the back bare fist. I got that from Kung Fu. I think it's helpful to have proper wrist alignment. It helps have a flat surface with the knuckles. To a certain extent, conditioning the skin a little bit on the knuckles. I prefer to hit the bag bare-handed rather than wrapping and having big gloves. But that's about it, honestly.
Maurie's asking, so Patrick, what was your experience when you shared what happened to you with your classmates?
I would have to get some specific, like classmates, meaning the people that were with me in the organization, or?
I presume I'm pretty sure that's the case. That's the question.
When you shared what happened with you with your classmates, but we kind of went through it all together, right? It was a shared experience because those email wars in question, like everybody was in the email, like it was a group email, so we were all going through this experience together. Shared what happened to you with your classmates. I mean, like I said, we did it very tentatively at first, like just speaking about it. I remember once, like we had already I had talked to one guy first because I knew he was on the outs a little bit. He was a little bit more of an outsider. So I talked to him first, got him to kind of agree that this wasn't okay. And then this other guy, and eventually we got a few people in. And then we had a meeting with another secret meeting with another guy. And we kind of sat him down and we're like, hey, what do you think about this whole thing? And he was like, he was trying to gauge where we were, if we were trying to see if he was a traitor or if we were trying to get him on board with our mutiny, right? So it was a very weird time, but thankfully it went well. We were able to get the majority with us, and that's how we got a lot of people out of that situation.
Nice. And this question, I think it'll lead us nicely to the last part. So what did you do after quitting Kung Fu? I know it's like a whole long story, but not everyone's familiar with what you do now. So maybe you can
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I talked about this at length on my video on my channel, which is entitled Why I Quit Kung Fu. But I'll summarize it here as well for you guys. So when I quit the cult originally, I still had my own school. At that time, I was teaching Kung Fu. I was a professional Kung Fu instructor. And I kept on teaching Kung Fu, unaffiliated with that organization. Okay, Diana. Hi, Diana. You did the same, I think. You split with your Aikido organization and kept on doing Aikido for a little while, right?
In a way, yeah. I still was running my school. That was my main source of income. I was already questioning Aikido at that moment. I was changing how I teach, but obviously after quitting, I had my hands free. I had no one to tell me what I can do and can't do.
Exactly.
So I was still running it, but then gradually it was hard to maintain running an Aikido school. I would have had to just completely switch over, or what happened eventually close it down. But I did continue for a while.
Exactly. So, and I basically went in the other direction. I know you focused 100% on YouTube, which is something really cool. And thanks to that, you share your story with a lot of people. I was running my Kung Fu school, but then having been disillusioned with the methods of that school, the logical next step was to question the training methodology and the techniques themselves. And when I opened that can of worms, I started reading Bruce Lee, Tao Jeet Kune Do, and I started researching, MMA, watching UFC. I started looking at it from a completely different perspective. All those challenge matches, Kung Fu versus MMA, and all that. That was my second kind of hard realization, realizing that, hey, this shit doesn't work. Like, okay, it can work. I mean, it's suboptimal. It can work on somebody who doesn't know how to fight, but it doesn't work as well as boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai, and BJJ. Straight up, like it's been proven time and time again. So when realizing that, it was a scary place to be because I had, 100 students and I was teaching Kung Fu, right? So you decided to close your school at that point. What I decided to do was to transform it. I slowly kind of integrated other techniques that I was learning. I first started learning the shit that worked. I started going to jiu-jitsu classes and educating myself online, paying for private classes and all that. And what I was learning, I started teaching it to our students. I think teaching is a great way to learn oneself. It's important to practice, obviously, and I have the experience, and it did help me a lot. And slowly, gradually over time, there was like this technique I integrated, and we transformed the school so we left the cult in 2013. In 2016 is when we introduced officially the concept of effective martial arts. So we kind of renamed our curriculum first. And that's when we let go of the forms, because we had essentially modified all the punches and kicks to be more effective at that point. But then we made the switch, announced it, and let go of the forms entirely, the katas. I thought that was a complete waste of time. And then we've been teaching that ever since. And only last year, close to 2 years ago now, we officially rebranded to Effective Martial Arts, which it was a painstaking process. It took years, literally. But I'm really proud of what we did. And it's been night and day seeing the way we can help students nowadays and the improvement that we can create, focusing on fitness, strength and conditioning, focus on the basics of each of the ranges of hand-to-hand combat, so people can at least get a good understanding and actually be able to defend themselves if they need to, much more so than they would in our Kung Fu training. So cool. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Hope that answers the question.
So I'll share the last comment publicly, and then I'll finish up with the last question. So the comment is, "This is a great interview." I agree.
All right.
Thank you.
Power Punks. I'm not sure who this is, Power Punks, but I've seen your comments a few times. So thanks for staying tuned. I appreciate the support.
Nice. So my final question is, So this has a bit of a pre-story, but we kept in touch via email, and you had a lot of resources gathered, and I'm sure the story even goes further. So are you planning to share some more in-depth details about the whole cult mentality and what you discovered afterwards in your channel?
I might, yeah, I very well might. So my first step was just kind of getting that story out there, but I think we've touched on a whole bunch of lessons. If you kind of listen to the story, you kind of get glimpses of, how not to get into a cult, what to do if you're in a cult, what to do if you're a family member that's in a cult, how not to be a cult leader. Just basically think win-win, try to help other people, don't abuse them, don't exploit people. So those are the most important lessons. But yeah, I might share. There's a bunch of very interesting resources, Netflix documentaries, testimonials from people that were in cults, not just in the martial arts. You've shared some on your channel, but in other fields as well. I think I touched on this in the beginning as well, but now like the thing is cults are kind of morphing as well today in these modern times with the internet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like these fake gurus online and people getting into that. So it's yeah, I might share that on my channel later. But I think it's intrinsic to human nature. To make a long story short, like we're tribal by nature, right? We evolved in groups of 100 to 150, and at the time, it made sense to follow the leader, even if there was abuse at play, because otherwise you get eaten by lions, right? So you can tolerate some bullshit by the leader, but when the leader took it too far, also he would get beaten up, killed, or eaten by other tribe members, right? So I think it's a natural human tendency to abuse power when there's no checks and balances. And yeah, I might definitely share some insights on that and some resources that I found, because I've countless sleepless nights of researching on the subject. I'm pretty fascinated by it.
Nice. And speaking of your channel, for people who don't know, is it Effective Martial Arts? Should they search for Effective Martial Arts on YouTube, or anything else you want to add?
So yeah, youtube.com/Effective Martial Arts. So that's our channel. I'm really excited about the content that we're sharing right now. So what's cool is that like we really focus right now. We're really focusing on the basics. And like I said, what we're doing is a one curriculum for striking, wrestling, and grappling. So a belt system for MMA is what we created, basically. I think that was one of the positive aspects of traditional martial arts, is the structure of the progression that you go through the ranks. It's just the content of that structure needs to make sense. And over time, we really perfected that. Like I said, we've been teaching that for many years now. And just the white belt curriculum alone, like if you want to develop the strength and conditioning and the basic body movements that will allow you to be effective in all three ranges, you can go check out our White Belt Basics playlists. You'll find more than enough information and guided training to help you through it. And right now we're getting into partner applications as well. So we have a whole bunch of grappling videos, principle-based approach to understanding, okay, what's your strategy in those situations? What are the highest percentages techniques? And more importantly, how to practice intelligently. So practice methodology, I think, so progression is not just techniques. It's how are you going to practice it? How are you going to practice it also on your own and also with a partner? A concept that I can touch on real quick is the concept of progressive resistance. Can you tell what it is, or you know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you've done this as well. You've been to good jiu-jitsu and MMA schools. Is when you're practicing, you don't want to make it too easy for your partner. So that's, I think, one of the main pitfalls of Aikido is the person just goes with the technique, right? Yeah. You're doing a wrist lock and they jump on the ground. But conversely, you can't just go and spar full out either, because you won't get to apply your techniques. You won't get to develop the skills. So finding that sweet spot of progressive resistance is really your method. So we explored that and a lot more on our channel. So cool. That's a little plug.
So I'll just add in the final word myself as well. Just say thank you again, Patrick. It does take guts to share that story, and I appreciate you opening up the story for the first time publicly for this media, for our chat together. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's going to be valuable to a lot of people, and this will stay here. And for people who want to check out more of your stuff and connect with you, ask further questions, they know now where to find you.
Awesome. And thank you very much for having me, Rokas. Once again, I really appreciate all the hard work that you've been doing for years now. You've had your channel and sharing very openly your process. I think that's there and it's documented for posterity. And a lot of people have been inspired by it, myself included. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited for the future of the martial arts industry. I think we're on the verge of something different. It's evolving. Mindsets are evolving. And I think you're contributing to that. So once again, kudos, and looking forward to great things in the future.
Cool. So I'll end the broadcast here, but we stay together in chat. So thank you, everyone. And I like to, I'm still choosing the final words, but I love these ones. Continue to own your journeys. I think that's a pretty cool one.
Nothing to add.
Cool.